To be in a place that never heard of the fall in the Garden of Eden.
The idea of a trinity, usually a God of dual nature, connected by a third spiritual nature that mediates in between them. We see this long before Christianity comes along.
Hermes, all that is moved, Asclepius, is it not moved in something and by something? Asclepius, assuredly. H, and must not that in which it's moved be greater than the moved? A, it must. H, mover, again, has greater power than moved. A, it has, of course.
And drawing on his experience as a successful businessman, he saw something no one else had. That, like money in a bank, electricity can be in credit, what he called positive, or debit, negative.
God is not in nature. God is separate from nature, and nature is not God. And this distinction between God and the world is not to be found in basic Hinduism or Buddhism either.
H, the nature, furthermore, of that in which it's moved must be quite other from the nature of the moved. A, it must completely. 2. H, is not, again, this cosmos vast, so vast, that than it there exists no body greater. A, assuredly. H, and massive, 2, for it is crammed with multitudes of other mighty frames, nay, rather all the other bodies that there are. A, it is. H, and yet the cosmos is a body. A, it is a body. H, and one that's moved. 3. A, assuredly. H, of what size, then, must be the space in which it's moved, and of what kind, must be, the nature, of that space? Must it not be far vaster, than the cosmos, in order that it may be able to find room for its continued course, so that the moved may not be cramped for want of room and lose its motion? A, something, thrice greatest one, it needs must be, immensely vast.
For example, Plato, in his Timaeus, says, anything created, then, is bound to be corporeal, visible and tangible, but fire is required for the creation of anything visible.
Is a problem of accountancy. Franklin's idea was every body has around it an electrical atmosphere. And there's a natural amount of electric fluid around each body. If there's too much, we'll call it positive. If there's too little, we'll call it negative.
Here's a whole mythology based on the insight that transcends duality. Ours is a mythology that's based on the insight of duality. And so our religion tends to be ethical in its accent. Sin and atonement, right and wrong.
And nature is organized so the positives and the negatives always want to balance.
And solidity for anything that is tangible, and earth for solidity. It follows that the God began to form the body of the universe out of fire and earth. But it's impossible for any two things to form from proper structure without the presence of a third thing.
It started with a sin, you see. In other words, moving out of the mythological zone, the Garden of Paradise, where there is no time, and where men and women don't even know that they're different from each other. The two are just creatures. And God and man are practically the same. He walks in the cool of the evening in the garden where we are. And then they eat the apple, the knowledge of the pairs of opposites. And man and woman then cover their shame. They're different. God and man, they're different. Man and nature is against man.
There has to be some bond to mediate between the two of them and bring them together.
H, this is not, O Asclepius, a moving with, but one against. They are not moved with one another, but one against the other. It is this contrariety which turneth the resistance of their motion into rest. For that resistance is
the best bond is the one that most effectively unifies itself and the things it is joining, and nothing does this better than correspondence.
Now, in the other mythologies, one puts oneself in accord with the world. If the world is a mixture of good and evil, you do not put yourself in accord with it. You identify with the good and you fight against the evil. And this is a religious system which belongs to the Near East following Zarathustra's time. It's in the biblical tradition all the way, in Christianity and Islam as well. This business of not being with nature.
So the mean stands to the first. Then the mean can also be treated as first or last, or alternatively, the first and last terms can be treated as means. And so all of them will, out of necessity, turn out to be identical. And since they are identical, they are all three one.
Namely a patriarchal and specifically Judeo-Christian justification of political authority. Filmer maintained that kings were entitled to absolute power over their subjects, who in turn owed their rulers absolute obedience. Why? Because both the king's wielding of power and the subjects yielding to it were decreed by God, the divine lawgiver. How did Filmer know this? The Bible told him so.
I once heard a wonderful lecture by Daisetsu Suzuki. You remember this wonderful old Zen philosopher who was over here? He was in his 90s. He started a lecture in Switzerland that I heard in Ascona. He stood up with his hands on his side and he said, God against man, man against God, man against nature, nature against man, nature against God, God against nature. Very funny religion.
Now, the image, of course, as you know, was that until God created Adam, God himself ruled directly. With Adam, God created a paternal authority to rule in his place.
The central head is the mask of eternity. This is the mask of God.
Mask of eternity.
That is the metaphor through which eternity is to be experienced as a radiance.
And these other two figures?
Whenever one moves out of the transcendent, one comes into a field of opposites. These two pairs of opposites come forth as male and female from the two sides. One has eaten of the tree of the knowledge, not only of good and evil, but of male and female, of right and wrong, of this and that, of light and dark. Everything in the field of time is dual, past and future, dead and alive, all this, being and non-being.
Now, a number of concepts and images come together here, such as patriarchalism, paternalism, the divine rule of kings or other sovereigns, absolutism, slavery, and last but not least, revealed religion, particularly Judaism and Christianity. What characterizes all of these ideas and images is that each sees the political order as naturally hierarchical, familial. On the one side is the father, lowercase f, or father, capital F, or Lord, God, or his vicar on earth, king or pope. On the other side are the people, seen as children, slaves, sinners, or a flock tended by a shepherd.
Last century before Christ, more exactly 133 BC to 27 BC, is the story of how Rome became an empire because she was no longer able to be a republic. It is the history of the growth of one-man power because many-man power had become impossible.
We speak with a sort of derogation of the nature religions.
The president in Washington sends word that he wishes to buy our land. But how can you buy or sell the sky, the land? The idea is strange to us. Every part of this earth is sacred to my people. Every shining pine needle, every sandy shore, every mist in the dark woods, every meadow, all are holy in the memory and experience of my people. We're part of the earth and it is part of us. The perfumed flowers are our sisters. The bear, the deer, the great eagle, these are our brothers. Each ghostly reflection in the clear water of the lakes tells of events and memories in the life of my people.
You see, with that fall in the garden, nature was regarded as corrupt. There's a myth for you that corrupts the whole world for us. And every spontaneous act is sinful because nature is corrupt and has to be corrected, must not be yielded to.
The water's murmur is the voice of my father's father. The rivers are our brothers. They carry our canoes and feed our children. If we sell you our land, remember that the air is precious to us, that the air shares its spirit with all the life it supports. The wind that gave our grandfather his first breath also receives his last sigh.
And they got their names, he says, from their mothers, as the women in those days had free intercourse with any whom they met.
This we know, the earth does not belong to man, man belongs to the earth. All things are connected like the blood that unites us all. Man did not weave the web of life, he is merely a strand in it. Whatever he does to the web, he does to himself.
In such an image, as Alfred Sochet, student of patriarchalism, reminds us, quotes, this is an extremely important sentence, which I quote from Sochet, quotes, childhood was not something that was eventually outgrown, rather, it was enlarged to include the whole of one's life.
Your destiny is a mystery to us. What will happen when the buffalo are all slaughtered? What will happen when the secret corners of the forest are heavy with the scent of many men, and the view of the ripe hills is blotted by talking wires? The end of living and the beginning of survival. When the last red man has vanished with his wilderness, and his memory is only the shadow of a cloud moving across the prairie, Will these shores and forests still be here? Will there be any spirit of my people left?
You get a totally different civilization, a totally different way of living, according to your myth as to whether nature is fallen or whether nature is itself a manifestation of divinity, and the spirit being the revelation of the divinity that's inherent in nature.
We love this earth as a newborn loves its mother's heartbeat. So if we sell you our land, love it as we've loved it, care for it as we've cared for it. Hold in your mind the memory of the land as it is when you receive it. Preserve the land for all children and love it as God loves us all.
In London, in the shadow of the British Parliament, stands a statue of another queen, Boadicea, killed by the Roman Empire nearly 2 millennia before. The statue boasts that over a world that the Romans never knew, the British ruled.
One thing we know, there's only one God. No man, be he red man or white man, can be apart. We are brothers after all.
Important problem we have to deal with in this century.
By the way, the left hemisphere man is unable to control environments. Right hemisphere, no problem. But the left hemisphere man, he has a goal, he drives quantitatively, he's going to use up every bit of gasoline on this planet. He's going to use up the whole atmosphere, he's going to use up everything. That's left hemisphere.
Don't you think that Americans, modern Americans, have rejected this idea, this Indian idea, this ancient idea of nature as revealing the divinity because it would have kept us from achieving dominance over nature?
Okay, so we are in one of those moments of leaps forward. The question is, what has that done to the human psyche on Earth?
Yeah, but that's the biblical condemnation of nature that they inherited from their own religion and brought with them. I think it was Nietzsche who said, be careful lest in casting out your devil, you cast out the best thing that's in you.